All right. Well, welcome again. We have a pretty straightforward agenda for our hour together this evening. This is the third of the listening sessions for the work of the Sustainability Advisory Council. And for today, after a short welcome, Missy Niergaard will give a brief overview of the Sustainability Advisory Council. And then we'll devote the majority of our time together to discussions. We'll break into, looks like maybe 2 or 3 small groups, and then come back together to share out the results of those discussions before finishing up with a real quick next steps. The only other thing I'd like to highlight here at the beginning is that throughout our time together today, if you have any detailed materials, proposals, or issues that we don't get to or you'd like to share separately, the council can be reached directly at an email address. It's sac@sustainability.wisc.edu, but you don't need to write that down or remember that. We will have that at the end as well up on the screen to give you a chance. Mostly just want to make sure you're aware of the other ways that you can provide feedback. A few last things before I hand it over to Missy. One, just want to acknowledge that we are using technology, so that always means the possibility we will be at the whims of that technology. So if there happens to be any sort of glitch, we just ask for a little latitude ahead of time as we deal with it. But in terms of how we want to work together and rules we want to hold ourselves accountable for this time, one, we encourage you to please keep your video on throughout the meeting. 2, please mute yourself whenever you're not talking so we can limit the background noise. At the beginning, I talked about the chat feature. Please use that to share resources, links, or to note technical difficulties. Nathan Yandel from our team will be keeping an eye on the chat and will do his best to respond as quickly as he can to any issues that come up. And then that raise hand feature, which I highlighted before, if you do have a comment or a question while someone is speaking, please use that raise hand feature and then we'll find the right time to bring you in. So last and maybe most importantly, I just want to acknowledge that I'm sure across all of our participants today, we have a great range in experience, whether that's experience working with or at UW-Madison, whether that's working with or researching or studying issues of sustainability, or even just using the technology we're using today. So we all want to give ourselves permission to be unpolished in this space. And as Deb is doing, we also realize this is outside of the normal working lives. We're all in our own homes. Pets and children are always welcome to make a quick hello as well. In addition to giving ourselves a latitude to be a little unpolished, sharing half thoughts as they come, we also want to make sure that we respect and honor each other's different perspectives, really with the goal of creating a comfortable and open virtual collaboration space for us today. So that is it for the welcome. I'm going to hand it off to Missy, who is going to go over the Sustainability Advisory Council.
Hey everyone, I'm sorry, we've just been adoring Addison and her little cone of shame tonight, so thank you, Deb. A little bit of background about the council's purpose and what the intention is for reinitiating a Sustainability Advisory Council like this. In 2010, there was a very thoughtfully crafted kind of strategic framework for sustainability for the campus. And now that we recognize that through the evolution of the concept of sustainability and the advancement of our communities and our community and our own priorities, our most important deliverable is a set of recommendations to the university's executive leadership team. So Vice Chancellor Heller and Provost Schultz are the executive sponsors on this. And what we're trying to identify is really about timeframes. We want near, mid, and long-term objectives. And a lot of different strategies will come up in our discussions. And as we know, things change rapidly. So we want to make sure that we're addressing opportunities as they come up, but really keeping our long-term goals in mind. So to support our recommendations, we're going to identify opportunities to advance priorities through these concrete actions. And then the council is going to continue to provide ongoing support. So this is not a one and done plan that's going to stick on a shelf and we're going to do things 1 through 50 and then fold it up. We're going to constantly be we're going to be constantly changing and updating the plan as we go along. Primarily, we'd really like to start using more of the research that we actually do on campus as proof of concepts for our campus and create opportunities for student engagement. And could you advance them? So I'm going to talk about timeframes. Right? We as humans use different temporal concepts than necessarily the systems that we work in. For instance, ecosystem services, they work in decades. Our political system obviously works in some very short timeframes. So this is our council timeframe. We're in week 3, is that right? Week 3, it's flying by. We just kicked this off on October 7th. And the council is made up of executive leadership. We have representatives from student governance, and we have some at-large positions, primarily with our students. And then we also have a student subcommittee, and that's really critically important to us. We have 45,000 students on campus, and obviously every generation that comes in, every new class we get is going to have different ideas. We want to make sure that we keep that continuity and that flow of energy going as the world changes around us. So as Alex alluded to, this is the last of our first set of listening sessions. Then we're going to delve into the work. We're using a framework from STARS, which it categorizes different efforts across sustainability in higher education. It is a rating system and a ranking system that is specific to higher ed. So we look at academics and research, engagement, operations, and planning and administration. So we'll be looking at those buckets and how those are addressed within the institution over the next few months. And then in spring, we're going to have another set of listening sessions so we can get feedback on the process and kind of get a original temperature take of where we're at with the process. And then hopefully late spring, we'll have something to the executive council, and then we can start moving forward. That doesn't mean that we're just sitting on our behinds waiting while we're planning. There's a lot of neat things going on campus, and we really want and welcome your input into that. And to give some context to that, I'm going to give a quick setting of what systems thinking is and a systems approach and what that could look like in higher ed. So I'm going to shut off my video because I keep losing myself when I share this. Okay, go ahead, Alex. Thank you. So in June of 2018, I was at the University of Illinois attending a seminar on emerging contaminants in the water, and I sat with a graduate student from UW-Madison who was there to present her findings on chemicals clinging to microplastics in the water. And then 1 year later, I had taken the position here, and I was embarking on the Wisconsin IDEA Seminar with 40 new faculty and administrators. That week began with Bill Quackenbush, the Ho-Chunk tribal historian, walking us out to Picnic Point, having us sit at the fire circle, close our eyes, and envision the lake through the Ho-Chunk memories. He described crystal clear waters and white sand. And with our eyes still closed, tribal members drummed and sang a welcome song, and we were told about how the sound of the music and voices would carry across the water, and you could see and hear the tribal neighbors all around the lake. It was a really moving experience. Was unbelievable. And what I realized was that Bill was sharing a tribal memory with us that morning, but it was also a vision and a mission, and he delivered it with clarity that the lakes once had. The history of sustainability at this institution didn't begin with the 2010 task force report, with Earth Day in 1970, or even with the founding of the institution in 1848. The history of sustainability here goes back 10,000 years, more than that actually, and that legacy is something to honor and embrace. We often talk about systems approaches in sustainability, and it's really nothing more than a means of describing incredibly complex relationships while removing the artificial linearity that we often impose on ourselves. So I'd like to tell a story of an imaginary yet plausible system. So we're going to go back and start with our microplastics. And these particular microplastics are textile fibers from our carpets and clothing, and they're dispersed through the air and water through the nastiest of vectors, our laundry appliances. My washer is running in the background right now. And then our heroes step in. Assistant Professor Wee from engineering is developing ways to use light to remove the contaminants, and Professor Sarmardi from Sohi is developing textiles that are less toxic and safer for the environment. And then let's say we partner with Under Armour and bring in our friends at Wharf to patent athletic gear that is non-toxic and doesn't shed fibers and is extra slippery, so our wide receivers and running backs are contributing to clear lakes while adding points to the scoreboard. We then take that textile revolution and patent it even further and use it for our commencement robes, and our alumni carry forth that vision and clean other waterways of plastics. And that is an example of a systems approach. It's leveraging our strengths and sharing our Badger spirit. You are helping to be architects of our future, and I invite you to use our history and long-held memories to bring clarity and purpose to our mission. We've fallen behind, but we haven't fallen apart, and together our work here will put UW-Madison back where we belong. Thanks, Alex. So one of the things that we're going to ask of you is, one, give us your ideas, give us your thoughts, give us what you see happening out in the world and where you see the world going. We often use comparisons to other universities to see what they're doing. University of Wisconsin is pretty far behind in packaging up what we do here. So we often look to some of our competitors, University of Michigan, some of our aspirational universities, Stanford and Harvard. Click. And then we also want to look at our international partners and what we're doing across the world. So the University of Sydney, I think, is particularly interesting because right on their front page, they said that one of their purposes is to tackle wicked problems, right? It's bringing the entire higher education enterprise to solve problems in the world. And that's what we'd like to get. We also want to do it with transparency. So University of Illinois has a pretty remarkable platform where everything is out there. You can look up anything, and that's something we also want to look for. So what I'm asking for you to do is look to our peers, look to aspirations, but totally think outside and differently. We need different thought processes to take us from where we are today to where we need to be. Alex?
Thanks, Missy. I'm going to actually hand it off to Deb, who's going to go over our small group activity.
Hey, thanks, Alex. So we have enough people that we're going to break up into small groups in a little bit, but I'm going to go over what we're going to do first while we have everyone together. So let's just do a quick introduction of people in the group. So your name, your major or field of study, or your affiliation with university. And then we're going to answer two questions. The first, imagine that UW-Madison is doing everything right when it comes to sustainability. Now it is 2035, what is different? So this is an opportunity to talk about not just what might be better, but certainly there are things that we could probably improve, but also what's new and different and kind of out there that we might want to try. And then after we talk about that for a little bit and kind of, come up with some ideas, then we will answer the second question, which is, in order to achieve the vision we just discussed, what are the most important sustainability priorities for the university to consider? Couple things to think about. Again, Missy's the vision that Missy outlined around systems thinking, keep that in mind. Systemic change, think about how we might do things better. Be careful to stay out of the weeds. If you have a specific initiative and any information, as Alex mentioned earlier, you can share that with them later. We kind of want to get the big picture of things. And be careful to share airtime. We want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to participate. And so before we break up into groups, does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask in front of, for the big group? If not, Alex, do some Zoom magic.
Sure. I'm going to go with about 3 smaller groups. It'll be about groups of 4, including a facilitator. So we'll get that started right now. See you all in a bit. Welcome back. Looks like we've got one more group that will be joining us here in just a few seconds. Well, Deb, I hope we didn't cut your group off.
No, we were pretty much done.
Okay.
Okay.
Share.
So, did we have 3 groups, Alex?
We did. Yep.
So
you, Nathan, and Jake.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. That's what I thought. All right. So we're just going to share some things out that the groups talked about. We talked about a lot of different things, but what they really wanted me to, call out was that for one thing, we should have options in labs for things that are reusable, like we used to have glass in labs and now everything is plastic, and if there's a way to do some of that, going back to having things that can be that are reusable would be really important. Having electric buses and the other fleet on campus to use renewable energy. I'm having trouble talking. Oops, I highlighted the wrong thing, not this. Shoot. Remove the Chamberlain rock. And then that the curriculum across many fields, having courses that have sustainability content, that it's not, that even in the sciences that there are people who don't really have an awareness of sustainability, and that the faculty needs to step up and take a leadership role in this, and that would be a way to do that. And then to think about composting, it would be a way to get everyone involved, because we all are impacted by what's happening and we all have an impact, and doing something around composting would be a way for people to learn about how things are used, how the waste stream works, and become a lot more aware of sustainability. So those are the things from my group. Nathan, you want to go next?
Yeah, that sounds great. So we had another really good conversation, and a lot of things came out of it in terms of the kind of how would the campus look in 2035. One of the big pieces was that it would be a more safe and welcoming space for BIPOC students and faculty. And we talked a little bit about what that might look like in the immediate term. The suggestions included actually sort of listening to and engaging, for example, groups like the UW BIPOC Student Coalition, which has had a hard time getting traction, particularly with the Chancellor, and remembering that diversity itself is not enough without inclusivity, and there's a potential issue on campus of tokenism that happens when we don't actually engage the BIPOC community. So also an interesting point about how the UW may have contributed to environmental racism in the city simply by being here and participating in the segregation of the city, and we should evaluate that impact, consider how our energy use, for example, causes environmental racist outcomes, basically. A lot of other ideas that came out. I'd say some of the big pieces were wanting more leadership. There would be more leadership in this hypothetical future from UW administration on sustainability and environmental issues. We would be addressing things like single-use plastic, moving towards zero waste, divesting from fossil fuels, moving towards carbon-free or even carbon zero or negative energy systems, and implementing sustainability into the educational mission of the campus more, including possibly by creating requirements. And there was a special focus on the business school and making sure that the people who are going to be our CEOs in our big businesses understand the importance of sustainability and incorporate that into the way that they're thinking.
Thank you. Anything else you want to say?
Yep, sorry. So for the second piece, try to kind of make it a little bit more concrete, although those were already some pretty concrete examples. But an attitude shift in the leadership, again, came back as a big thing that would be helpful to try to emphasize as we do our immediate term planning work, thinking a lot about those inequities that are happening on campus and what the implications of those are. And then, of course, things like waste and energy. And then I think one of the final points that was a really important one was a more substantial acknowledgement of the Ho-Chunk people. Investigating this idea that we're not just a land grant, but a land grab university, and thinking about things like if we're going to call the Ho-Chunk the original land stewards, we need to really be doing more for and with them.
Thank you. Jake, how about you?
Sorry to get off mute there for a sec. Yeah, we had a lot of great discussion topics. In my group, we focused a lot in the beginning on our built environment, talking about making more equitable solutions to transportation and how are we building the infrastructure for sustainable transportation. We also talked about what it really means to be a Badger, and to create meaningful change in sustainability on campus. We really need to integrate what sustainability means to each student on campus and make that part of our identity. So when you come to campus, we know that being a Badger is synonymous with being sustainable. We also talked a lot about our use of space in the context of Madison's campus. we're limited on space. We need to make sure that we're using our built environment to the most benefit possible in ideas like green roofs, community gardens, and things along those lines. And of course, we also talked about greenhouse gas emissions, reducing our environmental footprint on our campus. Going into the second part of the discussion, we really need to make a significant and identifiable goal when it comes to reducing our carbon emissions. And on that same front, identifying opportunities when we are building new buildings on campus. How are we incorporating sustainability into those built environments? And then we talked a lot about what that culture shift might mean on campus. And one great idea is having a required sustainability learning outcome or sustainability course, similar to our Wisconsin. And yeah, a lot of other great ideas, but those are the highlights.
All right, thanks. Yeah, some really good thinking that went on in these groups. I think that from all the groups that we've had, I think Missy and Alex and others will be really happy to have those ideas to share with the Sustainability Council. So Alex, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Awesome. Let's get this to change. So that is more or less what we had planned to work on today. But most importantly is just a huge thank you. We understand it's a lot to ask to add on an hour to the end of what was probably a very busy day, committing to another hour of screen time in that day, and just committing another hour of mental effort to be present with us in these conversations. So really, thank you. Your time and input is truly invaluable as we're getting this process going. Now, as Missy mentioned at the start, we are at the beginning of our work with the Advisory Council. So in addition to this listening sessions, there's many opportunities for you to stay up to date and to stay involved in the process. So you can follow along the progress of the council at our website. The link is here. There we will be posting meeting agendas, meeting summaries, as well as recordings from all of the Advisory Council meetings. The recording of the kickoff meeting, which happened 2 weeks ago, is up and available and includes some of the kind of kickoff speeches from Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, our Provost, and the Vice Chancellor for Finance Administration, as well as the other listening sessions. Those recordings are up and available as well. You can also stay up to date with the progress of the council by subscribing to our newsletter or following us on social media at SustainUW. And while this is the last scheduled listening session for this round, it is by no means your last opportunity to provide feedback. So we've also opened up a survey. So if you have other thoughts that you couldn't bring up or think of over the next few days, you can go to the listening session page on our website and you can find a link to a survey. I'm also going to follow up with an email to all registrants probably tomorrow with access to that survey as well. So you have another place of that. That'll be open for at least a few weeks. And we'll also actually looking to plan on doing periodic kind of pulse surveys after some of the council meetings, ways to get kind of fast feedback. And that would be another way for you to stay involved. And then as I mentioned, if there is a document or other reason you'd like to get in touch, you can always reach out directly to the council at sac@sustainability.wisc.edu. But that is it. Give you 4 minutes back in your evening. Thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you everyone so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.